So if this is your first Lunch and Learn session before, I'm Kate Lamont, occupational therapist and director at Thrive, and together with Kath Kirby, who's monitoring the chat and letting everyone in, another director at Thrive Aged Care, we run these sessions monthly for free on different topics that people working with older people or people supporting people living with dementia would be interested in hearing about. So welcome if it's your first session. We're excited to have you here. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We are recording this session and we will be sending you the recording link so you can share that with your teams and colleagues. We will also send you a copy of today's slides, so no need to take heaps of notes. Please make sure you stay on mute for the 30 minutes. It makes our lives a lot easier as presenters. And we will be using the chat. So if you have any questions or you want to make any comments, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And at the end of today's session, we will have time for questions as well. I would like to introduce Jen and Jess. It's like Kath and Kate from MyComs. We are super excited to be having Jen presenting from MyComs today, and Jess is in the chat as well. So Jen is a speech therapist and Jess is an educator in the disability sector, and together they have founded and created MyComs, which is a fantastic resource. When we heard about this resource, we knew that we had to showcase it to you, the people that we work with supporting people in aged care. I'm going to hand over now to Jen to tell you more about MyComs and how it can support people living with dementia. So over to you, Jen.
Hello, real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Kate and Kathy, for organising this event. You were very excited to share what we've made. We know your days are full on, often fast paced and sometimes unpredictable. So thank you for taking that time to focus on something at the core of our care, which is communication. So as Kate said before, I'm a speech therapist, and Jess, my brilliant co-founder, is from Disability and Education. Jess is in the chat, so if you need to ask any questions, do pop them in there. You'll probably hear from Jess. Together, we've worked alongside families, carers and teams, just like yourselves, and we've seen the vulnerabilities of people with communication difficulties. And we deeply do care about and value the work that you guys are doing every single day to support them. Today is about simple, practical ways to make communication clearer, calmer and easier for both your residents and, of course, yourselves. Let me start with a story. One resident we worked with was always asked, would you like tea or coffee? Most of the time she looked down or shook her head, so the staff assumed she didn't want anything. But what she really wanted was an Earl Grey, extra hot with just a dash of milk. We only discovered this when her sister popped in and made it for her, and her whole face lit up. Relief, yes, but also a missed opportunity. For weeks, her preference, her voice had been lost. For anyone here, would you say that this is something you've seen before? And if you have, please just pop in the chat and say yes or give me a thumbs up, just so I know I'm in the right place. Now, that one cup of Earl Grey wasn't about tea. It was about identity, choice, and being known. Communication isn't just words, it's how we express who we are and how we make sense of the world. For people living with dementia, words can take longer to process or sometimes just not land at all. When communication breaks down, people lose dignity, control and connection. And when it works, people feel safe, included and respected. Now that's the bigger picture we'll be exploring today. Making communication clearer so residents' choices are understood and staff feel supported and not stuck. Here's what we'll be covering in the next 25 minutes. Why communication breakdowns happen in dementia care, simple supports that you can use right away, and how this links with the new strengths-based standards, all practical and all focused on making your day a little easier. Here's another common story you might recognise. A staff member invites a resident to lunch. They explain clearly and kindly, but the resident doesn't move. Maybe they look away or they become a bit agitated. In these moments, it can feel discouraging. You've done everything right. You've spoken clearly, you've used a warm tone, yet the message just hasn't landed. This isn't about staff not trying and not hard enough. Dementia changes the way how spoken language is processed, especially comprehension. So what looks like refusal can actually be confusion or overload. For staff, this often means repeating the same prompt again and again, and let's be honest, that's really exhausting. Over time, those little frustrations build up and can contribute to burnout. And this is where communication supports come in. They help carry some of that weight, so staff don't have to always hold it in together. The strengthened aged care standards, gosh, it's a mouthful sometimes, make clear how central communication is. Standard 1, the person. Residents have the right to autonomy, dignity of risk, and cultural identity. Visual choice boards, meals, clothes, or activities are all things that we can be using in practice. Standard 3, care and services, looking at consistent person-centred care. Standard 5, clinical care, integration with those allied health professionals. And Standard 7, residential community. These are coming out November 1st. I'm sure you're very aware of them. And communication supports really do integrate and intertwine in terms of how we support our residents living with dementia and those other cognitive communication difficulties. So visual supports are a powerful tool, not just in care, but in everyday life. Think of your Google Calendar, the Uber Eats menu, or an Airbnb listing. Visuals work by taking information out of memory and making it visible in the environment. Instead of holding 2 words in your head, you can see the choices, the day's schedule, or the directions you need to follow. For people living with dementia, visuals ease pressure, provide extra time to process, and turn abstract words into something concrete. Lunch is ready becomes a picture of a meal. And because visuals are consistent, the messages stay the same no matter who is on shift. In short, visuals make communication clearer, calmer, and more human. The moments where visual supports matter most are often the hardest for people living with dementia or other communication difficulties. Meal times and menu with pictures makes choosing simple and removes the confusion. Toileting and hygiene could include step-by-step visual guides of what comes next, easing stress and preventing anxiety from building. Medication. Visual prompts reinforce routines that might otherwise feel overwhelming. Activities and outings. A visual schedule reduces uncertainty and helps residents feel prepared and more willing to join in. These aren't just tools, they help restore confidence, they help reduce refusals, and they make everyday care smoother for both the staff and the residents. Just a quick check-in, what comes to mind for you, and it's easy just to type one word in the chat, when it comes to where visuals might come into play into your care and to the services you provide? Pain, yes. We know that especially that comprehension and those executive functioning, those cognitive brain skills do really drop down when someone's experiencing pain, unmet needs. Yes, CALD is a big group. We'll touch on that in a minute because very hard to stay on top of, because if you don't speak multiple languages, or how do you support choosing what activities do? Big part is choice. So here's an example from a lifestyle coordinator we recently met with, who runs a weekly art group. She created a simple task breakdown with 4 steps. Go to the art room, collect paint, add water, and then paint. On the surface, it looks quite basic, but the impact was remarkable. For residents with dementia, even starting the first step can feel overwhelming. With a visual sequence, the steps became clear, predictable, and doable. The coordinator later shared with us that for the first time, residents were showing up to art. They were actually creating pieces they were proud of, and sometimes some of them actually even sent their paintings home to grandchildren. Now, what happened was this small support opened the door to independence, creativity, and connection with family. Another example here is a choice board, and choice is at the heart of person-centered care, especially for people living with dementia. But verbal choices like asking, "What do you want to watch?" can feel too quick, too abstract, or simply overwhelming. A visual choice board slows down the moment and it makes it concrete. Instead of needing the words to find, residents can simply point to, look, or gesture, and their preference is clear. It's a small adjustment that gives people real control in their daily lives. Now I have to laugh when I made this choice board. This is actually something that my parents would be choosing. Hogan's Heroes, ABC News, and Antiques Roadshow. I don't know if that's in the repertoire of the people that you support, but it is a big one in my family. And a daily schedule works in the exact same way. Instead of relying on memory, the plan is visible for everyone. For residents, this reduces uncertainty, it builds a sense of security, and it makes the day more predictable. For staff, it means fewer refusals to manage and calmer transitions between activities. We often hear that from teams that these tools make their jobs easier because when residents can see what's happening, they're more relaxed, they're more engaged, and they're more willing to participate. So what you can see here on the slide is just a daily schedule, a breakdown. So for example, going for a walk, eating lunch, visiting the physio, and a cup of tea. People can use that within the device themselves or simply export that into PDF so that they've got that printed out and in front of them across the day. A beautiful woman that I met with this morning, she was actually going to be printing out her daily schedule so that she could take notes and make notes about what had happened. For her, memory was really tricky. So remembering that she'd gone down to speak to the nurse in charge, which she does like to do regularly about particular administrative things, she could actually cross off and tick that she'd done it. So instead of her coming down multiple times to speak to that person in charge, and look, a big part of it might have been that social opportunity and that social connection. She could see and be reminded that, hey, I've already been down and I've done this. And she felt really excited to actually just take the notes, go, oh, yeah, we spoke about that and this is what we're going to do. And this is, I think today the conversation was about what they needed to add to the vending machine. So it was really beautiful. And I'll add a story when we were taking photos of her using in her life, because that's the main thing as well, is that when we're creating communication supports, when we're creating visuals, that we're using real photos. We're not using something generic, something that doesn't reflect the person. She wanted to share with her friends that me being there, I was making a movie about her, which I thought was really beautiful. But I think it's important to note here that when we make daily schedules, we're not using generic icons. We're using things that actually reflect that person and their life and their practice, because that also becomes really more familiar for them. Look, I'll be honest, making visual supports is time consuming, and often the question I get asked is, but where do I start? You don't need to change everything at once. Start small. Think about where the action happens. Place the visuals right there in the moment that they're needed. When you can, use real photos and pair them with a calm tone and gesture to make the message even clearer. Try them out during quieter times so that they're familiar, and keep them consistent across shifts so everyone's on the same page. We don't want to be introducing visual supports when the stakes are high, when the stress is at its highest. We want to use it in those calm and more predictable moments. Start where things are calm, not when they're more stressful. And that's usually where people lean into visual supports, is those stressful moments, and therefore they're not successful. Even small steps can build trust, predictability, and calmer days for both staff and residents. Which of these might feel easiest for you guys in terms of where to best start in using visual supports in your practice? Look, we can all agree that communication is vital. It's even written into the standards. But here's the reality. Staff are stretched and time is short. Creating visuals from scratch can feel impossible. Keeping them consistent across shifts is hard, and families can't always step in to help. If you've ever thought this sounds great, but when will I actually have the time to make it? You're not alone. And the last thing we want is for communication to feel like another burden. These supports should actually lighten the load and not add to it. And that's why we built MyComms, to save time, not create more work. It gives you ready-to-use templates from meal choice boards to daily schedules and lets you personalise with real photos and familiar language. Before, when we were speaking about culturally and linguistically diverse groups, if their home language is Mandarin, if their home language is Nepalese, if their keyboard on their device has that functionality, they can then add that language into the device, meaning it's more familiar. It does mean bringing family in or people that understand them to be involved in that, but there's not another barrier there. If that language needs to be personalized and customized, it absolutely can be. And yes, like I think it was Kate or Kathy just said, there's nothing cartoonish, there's nothing childish, there's nothing infantile about this app, which is the most important thing for us as well, is it's not fair and it's not reasonable and it's not dignifying for us to continue to use cartoon drawings, because that's currently what's most accessible within communities and within the current technology world. So MyComms in terms of cost is $14.99 a month or $165 a year. What's important for Jess and I is that 1 year of the app costs less than 1 hour of speech therapy. And this is not because speech pathologists aren't central to supporting communication and those cognitive changes. It's because we know access is hard, especially in regional parts of Australia. MyComms is really there to help empower those care teams to take the lead in creating supports that are backed by research. I know from where I'm from, in a small coastal town of New South Wales, there aren't many speech therapists in this space. They're absolutely amazing, the ones that we can access, but a big focus is on dysphagia. And we know that with the standards coming out, this isn't just about minimising those real risks associated with dysphagia and pneumonia. It's also about bringing communication and dignity into the piece. So we hope that this tool does add to that, as opposed to just being speech pathologists are there to help with those meal modifications. MyComms is really there to sit in your toolkit, so residents' needs are honoured, communication is clear, and inclusive care becomes easier across your team. I have moved so much faster than I thought I was, which might be good for questions. But look, a big thank you for being here. I know your days are busy. I know the standards are coming out, and this does create a level of uncertainty within your teams in terms of how do we address that? How do we work with the resources that we have? And how do we make sure that the residents are at the centre of all of this care? We've made 2 free resources. One is a really simple toilet yes, no. I always think that's a really lovely place to start with using a tool like MyComms, especially when those questions are really hard to ask. In one of our pilot programs, we had an ICU nurse specialist use it in the hospital, in the ICU setting, and she said it was actually one of the biggest breakthroughs because they didn't know if the patient needed to use the bathroom. This was familiar for them and they were able to communicate those needs. We also have here what's called a checklist that Jess and I have created. It's just to help for you, and it's just help for you and your team to go through in terms of where those standards sit, what communication supports could be included, and context in which they could be used. I've got here a link to our website. Look, we don't want this conversation to be one-sided. I think it's really important that we stay in touch so that we know exactly where the app MyComms sits for everyone and how we can make those adjustments to to better support the aged care community. Jess and I built the app. We own the app. We always say we're not arrogant about what we don't know. So that does mean that reaching out means that you're connecting with one of us, and we can make those adjustments and those changes to best support your care team, because we know this will look different in every setting, because the photos in there, those routines, those tasks, those breakdowns are simply really dependent on who is in your care. I'm going to go back to this slide because I realized I did not talk about those key widgets. In the MyComs app, you can see here you've got task breakdowns. So toileting breakdowns, taking medication, it might be those simple transitions. So for example, this morning we looked at how that person was going to transition from their room into the activity space. That felt really overwhelming for them. It felt really hard for them to initiate those steps. So we broke down that we were going to get her walker, we were going to move down the corridor, and then we were going to enter that activity space. That visual for her was really reassuring because she could visually see what was expected. And that verbal prompting, that stand up, let's go, yep, grab your walker, yep, I'm here to help. Every time we spoke to her, you could see that elevation, that tightening in her body, that this was really hard. So task breakdowns sit there. They're really flexible for you to make those adjustments. A daily schedule, like I said before, is a breakdown. What are you doing today, and what's that going to look like from start to finish? A weekly calendar is a really beautiful thing to bring in, particularly when that understanding of time is quite tricky. It brings out that highlight reel. So today is somebody visiting me. Today, who is going to be calling me, or what are those key activities across the day? Choice boards as well. So take photos or upload them from Google Images or use our templates. Literally within seconds, you have a choice board that you can digitally present, or you can print off by exporting to PDF. We've got over 100 templates within the app. We're slowly building those up to make sure they're more responsive of the different environments in which people are at. There's familiar brands in there. So we've got lots of things from dairy farmers and bakers, because at the end of the day, we are an Australian company, which means you want to see things that are really familiar. We'll start to add more as things come up. So even if today you wanted to even pop in the chat, it would be great to see these types of choice boards or these types of task breakdowns. We know that by creating that, we're essentially lessening the load of people, because you're just simply downloading it and making the adjustments. You can change the order, you can change the photo. But I know that as a speech therapist, when people reach out to me to make communication supports, that's costing about $200 an hour just under the NDIS scheme. And you guys can do that yourself with this tool, so that you're not waiting on professionals to do that for you. And I think that's really empowering. And I think that also means that things can be much more flexible. You're not waiting, and you're also to make those choices, because I know that choice boards, and I know that those task breakdowns, they expire really quickly. And if you're somebody who is living with dementia and those routines and those changes are happening, and you don't have access to that information, it's actually going to create more confusion. But if we can externalize that information and have it visibly in front of them, hopefully that sense of predictability and reassurance is enough to just, again, make that day a little bit brighter and make it a little bit more secure. I'll pop this back here, the link to our website, if you wanted to scan that. Otherwise, I think Jess might have popped it in the chat. We are www.comspec.co. Join in and register your interest through our email, but also do send us an email or book in a time through our Calendly to connect.
Thank
Kate, did you want to take
so
charge
much,
again?
Jen. Thank you so much. You've done so well for your first Lunch and Learn with us. You made great time, because the comments is going off. We've got so many questions, a few that I'll ask you, and a few that I think Jess is kind of answering in the chat. We had a question about research. Now, I know you guys are doing lots of pilots at the minute with aged care facilities. And there is research around the use of visual communication aids for people with dementia. That this is just such a new way to do it with an app. But you are doing pilots with some major aged care providers. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yes, so I think the proof is always in the pudding, and translational research is really important to us. So saying, yes, visuals are great, but what does that look like? And I think Jess and I, coming from a transdisciplinary background, we know that that role release is incredibly important, and we want to make sure through our pilots that firstly the app is easy to use, that staff feel really informed. We know that knowledge and innovation have to sit hand in hand. And if Jess and I are creating this innovative tool, but we're not running training and we're not making sure that that training is really responsive to teams, then it's not actually going to be the most effective thing possible. So, in terms of piloting, what we're looking at is modeling how we would set up the app. We're modeling how to problem solve just little things within the app as well. Problem solve why we create a task breakdown, how you might create a daily schedule, and how you might create a choice board and what that might look like for the person. We're also starting to get a little bit of what we call an ecological analysis of what the communication environment looks like. What supports are in place? Are they being used? Why aren't they being used? And what could be placed there so that things like mealtime routines within a group, or visual supports within the bathroom setting could be updated. So looking at research, absolutely. I am taking leave, but I previously worked at a university, and it's really important to me that things are validated. So if you're somebody that works in a university or is looking at research, do reach out,
Awesome.
because we know this is new to aged care, and we want to make sure that we're keeping with the times.
Awesome. I've got another really great question. Is family sharing available for the app?
So, granted, you're using the same platform. So, if you're an Android user and your parent or the person you love and care for is an Android user, it won't speak to each other. But if
Okay.
you're both on the same Google Play or you're both on the same Apple account, you can, yes. So I have, for example, I have the app and it's on my phone. It's also on my iPad. I often use the iPad for playing, so just so that the person can see the visual supports, and I use my phone for those editing features.
Awesome. One
And
last
you don't need to pay
question.
twice.
One last question that I thought was worth asking is obviously you talked about the per person price. Are you guys looking at pricing for more groups? I think there was a question around, if an aged care facility wanted to go ahead with the app, is it per person or are there sort of packages?
It's a great question. I think at the moment we always say that we want the app to live with the person themselves. So
Yeah.
those photos, those things that are really personal to them are stored on their device. Otherwise, I do think that we'll have 60 different accounts on the one tablet.
Yeah.
That's not to say that you can't do that. Every account can have 4 profiles. So the setting I was in this morning, we spoke about having a female account and a male account, and then another account, two other accounts as well that were a little bit more flexible. But we are welcoming licensing agreements. It will be new for us, so we want to have those conversations with different providers individually. But I do think over time, the idea is that cost, and I do see that there is a cost to it, is sitting with that person. So looking at their package or their plan, if they're still within the NDIS, all of that can be funded in there. But of course, group licensing is absolutely important.
And look, we might have some people here from community aged care and, same with home care packages, I'm guessing. Yes, a 2-week free trial. That is amazing. That sounds so good. All right, there's a few other questions, but I would suggest that if you've got questions and you want to follow up with Jenn and Jess, to send them an email. Jess, can you put that email in the chat again so people can see it? Thank you so much for your presentation. I think we've had a record amount of questions. So,
I'm looking at them now going, oh my gosh.
it's so good. But we will be sending you an email. We can pop Jenn and Jess's email details there. Like they've said, they've developed some free resources for you guys, so we'll make sure you get a copy of them too. Now, we are going to obviously talk about our upcoming conference because we would love to have you there. We've got our inaugural Not Your Average Aged Care Conference happening on the 18th of September. It's for leaders working in aged care, whether that's residential or community, and it's a day to pause, plan, and to work together to think about how we're going to address some of the key changes in the aged care reforms. It's not your average conference because you're not going to be sit there and talked at. We're going to give you time to really regroup, connect, network, and have a little bit of fun. So if you're interested in coming along, we would love to have you there, and we'll send some details in our email out to you as well. Again, we love feedback. If we would love for you to take a minute to scan the QR code and give us some feedback. This survey seriously takes you like 30 seconds to tell us what you liked about today and maybe what else you want to hear about. Again, we'll put the link to this survey in the email, and we would appreciate it because it just helps us know if we're offering meaningful things for you guys, if you want to come and spend your lunch with us and you're getting something out of it. Thank you so much to Jen and Jess for MyComs. Again, we don't normally offer these sort of spots, Jen and Jess, but when we heard about your resource, we knew that we had to tell the sector about it because we think it's really valuable and we think it can make a difference for people living with dementia. So thank you so much for coming along and telling us about, the amazing app that you've founded.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And please do stay in touch. And thank you for hosting us.
We're going to
turn. First lunch and learn.
That's all right. We're gonna turn the recording off now. And if anyone wants to ask a question of Jen or Jess, are you guys happy to stay on?